Hi parents, Dr. Tony checking in here, and we are going to talk about the one thing, which is really two things, that we see more of than ever before, and that is kids, especially teenagers, who are wound up and worn out at the same time. Now, we're going to really laser in on one of our very favorite people to take care of, which is teenagers right now, and really help them through this wound up and worn out challenge. But as you watch this, don't relegate it just to teenagers. You're going to see that unfortunately, so many of our younger kiddos, already by grade school, especially after the whole shutdowns and all the chaos we all went through with that, this wound up and worn out neurology really is starting to affect kids younger than ever. So it's not just a teenager challenge anymore. And then at the same time, hint, hint, you might be watching a video about you, yourself, and you, which is so many of us as parents, we're all wound up. We're full of anxiety. We're full of stress. We're just short on the draw. We're grumpy. We're grouchy. We don't sleep. We're wound up all the time. And then at the same time, we're worn out all the time. We're low. We're tired. We're depressed. We have no mojo. We don't get to the gym. We don't make good decisions because we're worn out all the time. So that's this conversation, and it affects our kids and it affects us. So what we're really talking about is this affects our family. So what does the wound up part really look like? And where does the wound up part really come from? The wound up part looks like anxiety, because it is anxiety. The wound up part can look like anger and meltdowns and outbursts and mean words and all of this ODD defiance sort of stuff. And this is a huge challenge for parents, where when you're looking at your teenager, if you just accept this thing really gets under my skin. And I've been blessed to have a family practice for so long that I had some incredible parents that I have always been able to take care of, really watch them do an incredible job with their kiddos, even as they went into this crazy time called teenage years, and they adapted and they pivoted and they stayed ahead of these challenges. And I got to learn that from my kiddos. So this is a real personal plus neurological video on this one. But our kiddos are definitely going to run into some tough times. They're going to run into tough times with school and social and friends and mean girls and mean dudes and everything else. And they're going to get anxious, and they're going to get angry, and they're going to get testy, and they're going to get short. But there's a fine line, and sometimes it's actually more obvious than we think, between, hey, they're just a teenager and something's wrong. Something's up with their nervous system where it is too wound up. See, when we talk about wound up, we're not just talking about the symptoms. We're not just talking about the anxiety or the anger or the short, testy teenager. We're actually talking about the nervous system, the sympathetic fight or flight system being too wound up, too easy, too quickly triggered, and too on all the time. That's actually the neurological cause of constantly raging, angry, upset, anxiousness, whether it's a teenager, a littler one, or an older one like us. There's a neurological underpinning to this. And again, is the teenage transition easy? No, it's made a whole lot harder and a whole lot more wound up and a whole lot more just not good if your child's nervous system is stressed out, wound up, and stuck on sympathetics all the time. We'll talk about at the end of this how to find that and take care of that if that's the case. But what about the worn out? The worn out sometimes is the worn out or kind of wound up. That's frustrating. That gets you wound up. That gets you ticked off. Worn out as a parent, when your kids are worn out, when they're tired, when they're exhausted, they're sad, they're low, they're depressed. They lose their confidence. They lose maybe their want and their desire to socially engage, to engage in school, to engage with friends, to engage with sports. We've had it described to us by so many incredible parents. Just recently, one of our amazing moms who were helping her, a teenager, she's not even a teen yet, just get started with this wound up, worn out, and she's already doing amazing after just a few weeks of adjusting. But she said she just lost her sparkle. I always refer to this, because it's just my weird words, I always refer to this as our mojo. See, when you're wound up, you eventually become worn out, because you can only run the nervous system on the gas pedal. We can only use our adrenals and our adrenaline and our cortisol and our epinephrine. We can only use those sides of our neurophysiological system for so long and have it be so wound up before we get so worn out and our adrenals and our nervous system goes low and we run out of the feel good, do good, go get after it side of the nervous system. And so the worn out is where a kiddo loses their mojo, they lose their sparkle, They lose that kind of like drive to get out. And this is what breaks hearts of parents when your teenagers just kind of withdraw from life, where they just hide from life, where they don't love life anymore. And when they go low, again, usually what does medicine do for the wound up part? Medication. What does medicine do for the low, worn out part? Medication. What's really at play? An imbalanced nervous system, not imbalanced chemistry. The neurotransmitter theory, all about dopamine and serotonin and all these other sort of things, it's accurate. It's just incomplete. See, what's happening for our kiddos is their nervous systems get out of balance first. It could go all the way back to birth trauma, colic, chronic ear infections, constipation, immune challenges, antibiotics, overuse of steroids and inhalers, and just all this stress, we call it the perfect storm, that gets into their nervous systems early. Now, what your pediatrician probably told you is, don't worry about it. They'll grow out of it. What we're here to tell you with videos like this and the content and the articles and the science that we're always talking about is we know that they often don't grow out of it. They grow into the wound up, sensory, ADHD, anxiety, overwhelm, and then they grow into, from that, the worn out, exhausted, low, fatigued teenager and adult. And so then life happens with both this anxiety and this edge to our nervous systems in our lives, and this exhaustion and this withdrawal and this low to our nervous systems in our lives. Neither are fun. The sweet spot is the middle. The sweet spot is where we want to get. The sweet spot is where God designed our nervous systems to be, whether we're little or whether we're teenagers or whether we're adults. Yeah, teenagers are actually supposed to be still energized and happy. It's a whole bunch of BS. See, our neurophysiology for our teenagers went to crap through the perfect storm of the last generations. That's why we always say, oh, yeah. No, come on. If they are well taken care of neurologically and with our lifestyle, which includes the mental attitude and the words that are being spoke into them or about them, and then the adjustments that are going into their nervous systems for them really help out, our teenagers can get their sparkle back, get their energy back, get their mojo back, get their happiness back, get their calm at the same time as their energy back, because we want both. We need to be calm when we need and energized when we need it, and they get their life back and they go back after life. And that's our favorite thing. So if this sounds like your teen, your grade schooler, or you, get scanned. Now, what does that mean? Get scanned. See, this whole neurology being wound up and worn out at the same time, we can actually measure it. We can find it. We can get to its true root cause by measuring the stress on the nervous system. And what we find on all of our wound up and worn out kids is that there's certain aspects of their nervous system that are overly tense, overly wound up, and then there's parts of their nervous system in their spine that are worn out and exhausted. And so that nervous system coming from the spine and the body especially feeds the brain. And it's sending too much wound up tension into the anxiety and the stress parts of the brain, and it's sending too little, what's called proprioception or information into the brain that energizes it, calms it, and connects it, and helps it socially, emotionally, and behaviorally regulate. So there's a set of scans that show us these exact patterns of wound up and worn out. In fact, that's actually where the phrase, that's why I coined the phrase a couple of years ago and have been teaching parents and other providers all about it, because on the scans, on their nervous systems, we see kids wound up and worn out, stressed out and weak, wound up and exhausted. And we know exactly the clinical protocol. See, now this is a different kind of chiropractic. Not only using this technology instead of x-rays and physical exams, this technology then sets up our clinical protocols. And we know the exact adjustments to calm and relax the wound up side of the nervous system and the exact adjustments to stimulate and activate the worn out and exhausted side of the nervous system and help the whole neurophysiological system get back to balance, get back to regulation, be where it needs to be at all times. And that child can better adapt, be more resilient, be more energetic, be more calm, be all the things we want them to be through neurologically focused chiropractic care. If you feel your teen, your child, or yourself are wound up and worn out at the same time, find out. Get a hold of us. Reach out to our office if you're local to me. Reach out to our directory through pxdocs.com. All the links we'll put in here. Learn more about it. Read the articles. Watch the videos on the website and our socials. Some are reels and entertaining, and they've got me dancing, and a lot of others, or my favorite ones, are just me here talking to you and educating, or Dr. Matt and other docs helping out. Learn more. Get to your local PX doc. Get to us if you're local to us. Get those scans and get a customized care plan to take care of the wound up and worn out so you get your full, healthy, optimally, perfectly healthy life back online.